Presentation of Science Trek on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho. By the Idaho National Laboratory, mentoring talent and finding solutions for energy and security challenges. By the Friends of Idaho Public Television, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Snakes have long, scaly bodies with no arms or legs. They live almost everywhere on Earth and play an important role in the ecosystem. Find out more about these amazing reptiles. Science Trek is next. Hi, I'm Joan Cartan Hansen, and welcome to Science Trek, and welcome to Princess. Snakes have been slithering on the Earth for about 130 million years. They're fascinating creatures. Scientists are standing by here at Idaho Public Television to answer your questions about snakes, and later on in the program we'll learn a little bit more about amphibians. But first, let's find out about snakes. There are over 2,500 different types of snakes in the world. Snakes are reptiles. They're cold-blooded. That means a snake's body temperature depends upon the temperature of where it lives. So snakes like to keep warm by absorbing heat from sun-soaked rocks or from the ground. Or they hide under rock piles or low-lying plants to stay cool.
Snakes have scales covering their skin. The scales protect their bodies like armor. The scales also help keep moisture inside their bodies so they don't dry out in the sun.
Snakes travel in different ways. Most commonly, a snake moves by pushing one side of its body and then the other against rocks or bumps on the ground. It can also use its scales to help get some traction. Snakes don't have eyelids. Instead, snakes have a clear scale protecting their eyes. That's why they always look like they're staring. Snakes don't have ears like we do, but are very good at detecting vibrations. And snakes have special smell detectors in their mouth and can pick up the scents in the air with their forked tongue.
Snakes are predators. They eat their food whole. They have special jaws that allow them to open their mouths really wide.
Snakes usually lie in wait and then quickly strike and grab their prey. Some snakes, like boas, squeeze their prey to death. And some snakes inject venom to kill their prey. Rattlesnakes are the best known of the venomous snakes here in the Americas. When a rattlesnake senses danger, they make a loud noise with the rattles at the end of their tails. It's a warning to stay away. Though most snakes are harmless, you never know, so don't bother snakes in the wild.
But snakes you buy at the pet store can make good pets.
Yeah, just be sure you know how to care for them properly and that you want to do it for a long time, because some snakes can live as long as 20 years. Many people are afraid of snakes. Don't be. Snakes play an important role in nature. They eat a lot of things we think of as pests, so without them we'd be in trouble. Snakes live in almost every part of the world. A few types of snakes are endangered because we're destroying their habitat or killing them off. So respect snakes, don't bother them in the wild, and appreciate their role in the balance of nature. And joining me now to answer your questions about snakes are Charles Peterson, Professor of Biology at Idaho State University, and Frank Lundberg, Adjunct Professor at Boise State University and a wildlife educator. Thank you both for joining us.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this interesting group of animals.
Thanks, Joan. We're really happy to be here today.
Okay, let's go to your questions.
Hi, my name's Allegra. What kind of snakes live in Idaho?
There's 12 species of snakes that are native to Idaho. They're in 3 different families of snakes. One is the rubber boa. This is a small snake that's a true boa constrictor, and it's found throughout the state. There are 2 species of rattlesnakes, the prairie rattlesnake and the western rattlesnake, and those are the only snakes that are dangerous to humans that are found here. And then there's 9 species of what are sometimes called harmless or colubrid snakes, and that includes snakes like the garter snakes and the gopher snakes, and several other species.
Hi, my name is Gust. What is the biggest snake in the world?
Okay, there are actually 2 large snakes in the world. One lives in the Western Hemisphere, which is a species of boa constrictor called the anaconda or water boa of the Amazon. And the other is a python which lives in Southeast Asia called a reticulated python. They both have been known to get in excess of 30 feet. The anaconda lives in the water and can weigh several hundred pounds.
Hi, my name is Madeline, and my question is, what do snakes eat?
Snakes are exclusively carnivorous. That means they only eat other animals. And there are some species of snakes, like our terrestrial garter snakes, that'll eat all kinds of things. They'll eat, earthworms and slugs and leeches and snails, or fish, salamanders, birds, mammals. They'll eat all different kinds of things. And then you have other snakes that just specialize on things. And the best example I know of that is a queen snake that's found back in the eastern United States that feed, I believe, almost exclusively on crayfish. And so you find a wide variety of things that snakes eat. Some of them are specialists, some of them are generalists, but they all eat exclusively animals.
Hi, my name is Carson, and my question is, what is the most venomous snake and how venomous is it?
The most venomous snakes in the world are in terms of toxicity, are the sea snakes. The most venomous land snake is called the inland taipan, which is a native of Australia. And Chuck, you might like to comment on the toxicity of the venom.
Yeah, the venom is a very complex material. It comes from a mixture of materials. It comes from glands, salivary glands, and it has many different components to it. There are things that dissolve or digest tissues. There's other neurotoxins that paralyze nerves or interfere with nerve signals, and there's spreading factors and things like that. And the venoms vary between species and even, between individuals. That's not the same as how dangerous a snake is, because for things like the sea snakes, they very rarely bite people, where there are other snakes that have maybe larger fangs, or their behavior is such that they're more likely to bite. So the danger and the toxicity are not necessarily the same thing.
How do snakes find their dinner? Well, some have a special organ located near their eyes. It helps them to detect small changes in temperature. That helps them to find the heat given off by the bodies of rodents or other animals they might want to eat. Yum.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and my question is, how does a snake move?
Snakes move, the locomotion of snakes involves 3 different movements. So one is called sidewinding, where the snakes move side to side. A lot of snakes, if they're moving in a straight line, we call that rectilinear creeping. And when they go in I guess we call it a serpentine motion, or they crawl like we commonly think of snakes crawling, we call that serpentine or concertina motion. And they move by a combination of muscles and their bones.
Hi, my name is Colin, and my question is, why don't snakes have legs?
Scientists think that snakes once looked a lot like lizards, that they did have legs. But as the continent shifted, as the earth changed, as conditions changed, they gradually adapted, these lizard-like creatures gradually adapted to living underground and in small places. And in doing that, they lost the legs, so they could be so they could survive more easily in a small, dark, compact place. This took place, by the way, over millions and millions of years. It was not a sudden event.
Hi, my name is Brooklyn. How many different colors of snakes there are?
There's many different colors of snakes as there are kinds of snakes. And snakes got their colors the same way perhaps they got their legs, which was adapting to the environment they're living in. If you look at a color of a snake, you can learn a lot about where it lives, because it's trying to camouflage itself. It's trying to both hide from prey that could harm it, and also hide in a way that something that it might want to eat won't see it.
Hi, my name is Lily. My question is, how do snakes hear?
Snakes don't hear airborne signals very well. They have no external ear. So like much of our speech would probably not be able to be, heard by a snake. They primarily detect vibrations, from the substrate that pass through their body and then like through the skull and the jaws. But it's believed that they can hear sounds up to about maybe 150 cycles per second. But generally lower frequency sounds are what they hear.
Hi, my name is Lilo. My question is, what is a snake's biggest prey?
Well, it depends on the size of the snake. Snakes can, as most people are aware, I think, swallow. First of all snakes swallow their prey whole, and they can swallow prey that's bigger than their head due to the muscles in their jaws. So large pythons have been known to swallow things as large as small deer. It simply depends on the species of snake and the availability of prey in whatever area it lives in.
Hello, my name is Sedona, and my question is, can snakes swim?
Yes, all snakes, interestingly, can swim, and all snakes can climb, but some do it better than others, and it depends on the particular species. There are even some snakes in Southeast Asia that can, I guess we put it in quotation marks, that can fly. They can spread out their body and glide from tree to tree.
People often confuse reptiles like snakes with amphibians like frogs. So let's learn a little bit more about amphibians. There's nothing like a swimming pool on a hot summer day. Sticky, sweaty, sweltering feeling gets instantly washed away as you slide through the cool water. But why is it that even on the hottest summer day, after being in the water for a while, you can't wait to get out and heat your body on the sun-warmed deck? That feels good. Ooh, you're hot. Ooh, you're cold. Hot. Cold. But you're warm-blooded. You really don't need to bask in the sun. Your body temperature usually stays the same.
But when I'm sick, my mom says I have a temperature and I can't go outside to play.
When your body is fighting germs, your temperature can go up. And if it goes up too much, that's a bad thing. Then, you guessed it, yucky medicine.
Ugh.
But remember, you're warm-blooded, so your body temperature can only change a few degrees. Amphibians are cold-blooded.
Why did the frog go to the hospital? To get a operation.
So what do cold-blooded animals do when it's really cold outside?
Well, they hibernate, just like a bear. Well, not exactly like a bear. See this frog? It's frozen solid. In the colder months, it buries itself in the wet dirt and spends the winter, well, kind of like a popsicle. It even stops breathing. But each spring, when the world begins to thaw, it comes back to life. But like a popsicle, frogs and other cold-blooded animals don't like it when it gets too hot either.
So what do?
Some amphibians, like this spadefoot toad, chill out by digging back into the dirt where it's cool. This is called estivation. It's like hibernation in the summer, except now amphibians are trying to beat the heat instead of avoiding the cold.
How deep can a frog dig?
Knee deep, knee deep.
But before it gets too hot, amphibians have another job to do. They have to find a mate and reproduce. Male frogs and toads attract their mates by singing. Well, not exactly. More like this. Each kind of frog or toad has its own song. These songs attract the female so the pair can mate. A group of singing male frogs can be very loud, so listen for them when you're near a pond this spring. It works better if you're really a frog. Frogs lay their eggs in the water. These eggs are in a substance that looks like, well, snot. Yeah, it sounds gross, but this protects the eggs from drying out and from soaking up too much extra water. How fast the eggs develop depends upon the temperature of the water. The warmer the water, the faster the eggs develop into larvae. Larvae are the next stage of growth. Salamander larvae look kind of like their parents, but the eggs of frogs and toads develop into tadpoles that look pretty different from mom and dad. Amphibian larvae will stay in the water until they become adults. Going from egg to larvae to adult is called metamorphosis. For amphibians, this means starting life as a water animal and becoming an adult that spends most of its time on land. A double life.
What did the frog order at McDonald's?
French fries and a Diet Coke.
Amphibian larvae are eating machines, munching mostly on water plants like algae. But as they become adults, they begin to eat other things, like the bugs that live in the water.
What'd the frog say to the fly?
You're really starting to bug me.
Most adult amphibians eat invertebrates, animals that don't have a backbone, like this cricket. Worms, slugs, and other insects also make a good snack. Large amphibians, like the bullfrog, can eat pretty big creatures, like mice and birds. In fact, amphibians eat a lot of animals we think of as pests.
How does a frog catch something like a fly? Hey! They're really fast.
Amphibians are able to catch their food because they have big mouths and a pretty awesome tongue. Their tongue is sticky, and it attaches in the front of their mouth instead of the back, like your tongue. When food walks past or flies by, open goes the mouth, out comes the tongue, and dinner is served. Could you do that? How about something easier? Maybe not. Amphibians have become important in helping scientists take care of the world around us. Biologists study them to learn about problems in the environment. When amphibian numbers drop, scientists look for the cause and how to fix the problem. This helps all living things, including us. Spring is the time to listen and look for frogs. So what are you waiting for? Hop over to the nearest pond to meet some of your amphibian neighbors.
Get him! There! All right!
Hi, my name is Shade. My question is, where does the snake's venom get made?
The venom is made in the salivary glands in the head, and then there's a duct that connects that to the hollow hypodermic needle-like fangs to inject it into the prey. And there's been a lot of study recently into how that happens and how genes are turned on that are releasing things like, normally you would associate digestive enzymes with the intestinal tract that get synthesized like in the salivary glands. So it's a very interesting and complex process.
Hi, my name is Ubav, and my question is, why do snakes attack people?
Snakes really don't attack people. In fact, that's one of the reasons, at least, that I'm fascinated and I've studied snakes over the years, is because they're not like what most people think they're like. they're not naturally aggressive towards us. They're simply interested in finding food and trying to do the same things that we try to do, like shelter and reproduce and regulate their body temperatures. There are some snakes that are more aggressive than others, but by and large we should not assume that every snake we see is out to get us. They simply aren't. They're in fact very, very shy creatures who want to be left alone.
I think most snake bites result when the snakes feel really threatened, so that if you get too close to one without its knowing, like you step on it, or someone's climbing and they put their hand up on a ledge where they can't see, and then the snakes will try to defend themselves. But we've handled thousands of rattlesnakes in my laboratory out on the desert in our studies, and it's quite rare for a rattlesnake to strike unless it's been touched. Usually when we try to use snake hooks or snake tongs to capture the snakes is when they'll strike out. An unprovoked strike is relatively rare.
If someone is interested in a job someday working with snakes, what should he or she study in school?
Well, if you're in grade school and just starting out, you should take all of the classes and read all of the things you can about science in general, and then begin to study as you get older, biology classes and classes about nature and how different natural systems work. And Chuck, you might want to go further because you have.
Yeah, like for example, in high school, you would want to take a biology class, and then in college, in addition to a general biology class, you might want to take a course in like vertebrate zoology, or many schools or some schools will offer courses just in the biology of amphibians and reptiles, which is called herpetology. And then, a wonderful way to learn about them is to visit a zoo or visit an aquarium or a natural history museum, and there you can see things. And then, many nature centers and national parks, things like that, often will have exhibits or activities where you can handle a snake and see the animals live.
There are very few places in the world where you won't find snakes. Snakes cannot survive in very cold places like the Arctic Circle or in Antarctica, and there are 2 islands where no snakes live: Ireland and New Zealand.
Hi, my name is Amy. I go to Dalton Elementary, and my question is, why do snakes have pool vision?
Different species of snakes have different quality vision depending upon the species. But by and large, the snake's major sense is its sense of taste and smell, which it receives through flicking its tongue and through analyzing through what's called the Jacobson's organ in its mouth. Snake's vision is for most species primarily used to detect motion.
Hi, my name is Ruth. How do rattlesnakes rattle their tail?
Rattlesnakes have special muscles at the base of the tail that are called the shaker muscles, and they're arranged in 3 bundles that alternately contract. And the contraction rate is some of the highest or fastest contracting muscles that have ever been measured in vertebrates. They may be able to contract those muscle fibers 100 times per second. And then, the rattle is made up of a series of segments. Every time the snake sheds its skin, it adds another segment at the base of the rattle. And then sometimes you get a number of segments there and then they break off. But the contraction of those muscles causes those segments to basically rub against each other and to make the rattling noise.
Hi, my name is Travis, and what is the smallest snake?
The smallest snake is, I think they're called a thread snake. It's in a family of primitive snakes, and they get about 4 inches in length, and the photographs I've seen of them, they're able to coil up on a quarter. So that's about the smallest snake that's ever been found.
Hi, my name is Nolan. I go to Sago Elementary School in Sago, Idaho, and my question is, how big is the biggest snake in the world?
The biggest snake that we know of that ever lived on Earth is called Titanoboa. They have fossils from South America that have been found. And that snake is estimated to have gotten over 40 feet in length and may have weighed as much as 2,500 pounds.
Why did you want to learn about snakes?
I first became interested in snakes, I think just by looking at them and realizing there was something different, and they behave differently from other animals, and I wanted to find out more about them. And the more I learned about them, the more I realized there was still more to learn about them. And I think anytime we can learn how something behaves that's different from us, we can learn a lot not only about that creature but also about ourselves.
Well, I've been interested in animals in general my entire life, and when I was quite young I was fascinated with turtles, and my interest in snakes really didn't, I was actually afraid of snakes until I was a teenager, and then I kept one as a pet, and then after that it kind of took off, and I've been very fortunate that I've been able to work in a zoo and to work as a keeper, and then study them in college, and then find a job where I could study snakes and teach about them, you know, for my livelihood. So I feel really lucky that to a large extent I've been able to continue doing things that I did as a child for my work.
My thanks to Charles and Frank for answering students' questions today, and thanks to Princess for showing up.
Okay, well, thank you for the chance to respond to these interesting questions.
Well, thanks, Joan. It's been a lot of fun.
You can learn more about snakes and lots of other scientific topics on the Science Trek website, and we'll answer more questions about snakes on Science Trek, the web show. And if you want to submit a question for Science Trek, it's easy. You can send it as an email or as a video question, recorded on your webcam or cell phone. And if you're an educator, we'll even lend you a camera. And each week, check out my blog for the latest science news for kids. You'll find all the details at idahoptv.org/science-trek. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on Science Trek.
Presentation of Science Trek on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore and Bettis family legacy of building the great state of Idaho. By the Idaho National Laboratory, mentoring talent and finding solutions for energy and security challenges. By the Friends of Idaho Public Television, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
If you want to learn more about this topic or watch our videos, check out the Science Trek website at idahoptv.org/science-trek.